Good afternoon, everybody, and happy Friday. Happy Armed Forces Week. Welcome to Careers Sitrep, the first inaugural Careers Sitrep, which is great to do in Armed Forces Week. I know it's been a pretty challenging 15 months or 12 months to 15 months for us all. But actually, there's real grounds for optimism right now with the economy starting to pick up, lots of sectors and jobs becoming available, which is really great to see. So we want to mark this first one. What better organisation, more or area to go into in our first inaugural one in Armed Forces Week is to celebrate the NHS and the fantastic transition that service leavers do into civilian employment, but also especially into the NHS, which is happening a lot at the moment. So we'll be talking about how veterans make transition, how it's good, how the NHS is a great career path for service leavers and veterans. And we'll be doing that over the next 45 minutes to an hour, actually. So you're most welcome to join in, post comments of your own experiences, etc. We'd really love to hear from you. Okay, so it's not just me. I'm Alistair Halliday, Chief Executive of RFEA, the Forces Employment Charity, and also served in the Royal Navy for 33 years or so, and delighted to be here. But I'm actually delighted also to be joined by a very special team of 3 guests today. And the first person I'd like to introduce is Deborah Poneskis. Okay, Debs is the manager of the Step Into Health program in the NHS, works in the NHS in the employment, NHS employers area, also former Army Colonel and service in Afghanistan and a distinguished Army career. So it's great to see you, Debs, joining the team today. Second, we've got Annette Berry, Army nurse and then Army officer, nursing officer, and then who went into the commercial world, then into career transition partnerships, supporting service leavers into transition, and has been with RFEA for quite a number of years now, and now runs the superb military women program, which supports female veterans into employment. So welcome, Annette. And then thirdly, Jim Holland, ex-Royal Regiment of Wales. Great to see you, Jim. Jim had many years in the army and then moved into the police force and made transition first into the police. And then after a period in the police force, then went into health, into NHS, and now is with the Welsh Ambulance Service, doing some great stuff down in Wales. So great to see you, Jim. Okay, so that's the team. So very much for everybody, really, this is a conversation. We've got quite a few things we want to run through, a bit about transition, about our own experiences, about what makes veterans really good and employable for employers who may be listening. All of these sort of things, with a very much celebrating the incredible work that the NHS has done over the last 15 months whilst we've had this pandemic. So lots of stuff to get through. So it's great to see you all. And let's crack on. So I think the first thing, perhaps before we start, really is it'd be quite good to have some more of our own personal experiences of our own transition and their own how we found it and etc. So, Debs, what was your sense? How did it go for you? And if were there any things which you would do differently, perhaps the next time?
Yeah, and especially I'd start by saying I had a fantastic 26 years and did loads of really brilliant jobs in the army, commanding a regiment. I mean, what could be better than that? But I left under a medical discharge, and that's not the way any of us, I think, chooses to leave or thinks we're going to leave when the end. So that has a dent in your confidence to start with. And you've got to go through, how do you pitch yourself? Am I going to be able to do this? Am I going to be as good as anyone else in the organisation? So that transition was quite an anxious time for me, I suppose. It doesn't take long when you're in a new job before you realise, yeah, you can do it. And I have got some really great skills, and there's loads of things I can bring to the party. But it's anxious at first, I think, would be the overwhelming emotion.
That's a really great thing, a very interesting thing, because it is really a common thing for many people. And actually, sometimes it does go on for quite a period of time. And there's a real thing for those of us who are helping support service leavers and veterans into it to overcome this. So it's a really interesting point. Jim, how is it for you?
Well, I joined the army when I was 16, and I left at a point just before I was entitled to a resettlement course. Now, if in hindsight I should have stayed an extra year and got my resettlement course, but I got to a point where I was still fairly young, and it was either make a real career in the army or try something in Civvy Street. And I didn't really think things through. I was in a little bit of a wilderness initially when I left, and I'd lost that sense of belonging.
That's a really interesting point, Jim.
One of my younger brothers had joined the police and said how much he was enjoying it, and I thought, well, I'm going to give it a go. I applied and got in, and I got that sense of belonging back, and the army really stood me in good stead. And I had a career, 28 years in the police, and did some interesting things.
I mean, that's great to hear, Jim. I mean, I think what you said, there's some really good themes in there, actually, about the right time to leave.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll be coming back onto that. And also, the other thing is about the sense of you get of a belonging, which we all get through our service in the armed forces, and which organisations do create that. I think we'll come back to that as well, because I think the NHS, frankly, is very much in that space. So that's really interesting, Jim. Really, thanks.
Yeah.
Annette, what's your sense?
It was interesting leaving the services. I stopped being a nurse for physical reasons of my hands. I was being a theatre sister, and I ended up moving into the commercial world, and it was so very different. And echoing what Jim and Debs have said, you do feel a little bit cast adrift, and you do very much feel that your self-esteem takes a knock and your confidence takes a knock. And I ended up going for a job that I thought was at my level, and actually got offered a much higher grade as a consequence. So there was that career confidence boost of, I can do more than I realise. And it's one of the things that, brought me back round to doing transition and working with RFEA, actually, is to be able to support people and give them the self-esteem and boost their self-confidence, take away the self-doubt into work.
Yeah, indeed. Very, very, very good indeed. I mean, and I think it's quite interesting how different perceptions and experiences. And I think a key theme also is the fact that transition really needs to start perhaps earlier. That's when we're serving in our busy jobs in our service careers, but also goes on for later than just the 2 years that people associate it with it. Because quite often, say for myself, I mean, I enjoyed transition was very quick. Went into a big company, which was fantastic for 3 years. And then after that, I've then found it very difficult for a period, applied to lots of things, and then had some nice opportunities afterwards. But it's interesting how everyone's experiences go through these things. So I think there's some really good themes. But perhaps we might think more generally. What is it we think then that the attributes really for service leavers more generally, when you leave, the sort of things which we brought up, the training and all of these other things, what do we think really make it good for service leavers and veterans to fit into the workplace? I don't know, Annette, what's your sense on that?
I think service leavers are really, they come with the skill sets they've been trained with. I mean, the military and the army particularly is one of the biggest apprenticeship providers in the UK. So people are coming out with skills and training, which these days especially readily transfer into the outside world, because it does feel like you're exiting a bubble. And I'm sure Debs and Jim can talk about all the values and the transferable skills that they come with as well. I think it's massively important that they get, service leavers, our veterans, recognise what they have within that toolkit.
Yeah, and for me, it's more about the values and the skills, but also what your drivers are, and they're different for all of us when we come out, I think. And that goes back to what Jim was saying in terms about when you choose to come out. So you've got to absolutely be clear about what your drivers are for your next career. Whether that's paying a mortgage or whether that's giving something back, or both. Be clear about that before you start, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a really key thing, isn't it? And everyone, depending on the time they've spent in, those can change. And some people do leave, and actually they're not that fussed, or they don't need another career, and they might want to do other things. I mean, I think for me, there's a real sense that there's a sort of some people depending on which trade they're in the armed forces, have some real great thing. It might be air engineering or something, which goes directly into a company. But there's a much more general thing about the skills, the softer skills. And I would home in on two things. I really think the training piece, the fact that everyone has been trained, even the most junior infantry soldier has had a training package. And hardly any companies, well, no companies would do that. So that is fairly unique. And that means everyone has been trained to an extent, and they're used to being trained. they're trainable. So when when we come out, we're very used to adept and agile to be able to move into something different, which so it may well be the skills you don't have on day one, but it means that you can do. And the other bit I would just pluck out is probably the leadership and management. Again, from junior soldiers, junior infantrymen to all sorts of people, officers and NCOs, everyone is used to leadership and also being led. So I think that's another key thing. I don't know, Jim, you've probably got some other views on that as well. What would you say?
Definitely. Coming across more recent service leavers from my time in the police, and more recently now with the Welsh Ambulance Service, speaking to them, they seem to have more access to getting formal qualifications. At the time I left, I've had the Junior Army Education Certificate, which I found is, it's not recognised anywhere. And the only thing that was open to me is if I'd stayed in, I'd have had the pre-release course. And also I think the release package for service leavers now is much better. And I would say to anybody planning on leaving is make the most of those opportunities, because I've found since leaving the police that employers really want these qualifications. And at the moment, I'm finding myself having to do a level 2 in functional skills for maths and English to try and progress to be an emergency medical technician.
Yeah.
And that's difficult. Now I'm 56 next month.
Yeah.
and prior to that, they would recognise your previous experience and let you go through on that. And that doesn't seem to be the case now.
Absolutely, Jim. I mean, it's a really key point, isn't it? And I think, it's interesting. I would say I've had almost every day for the last 3 or 4 days calls from various companies, employers. Actually, quite a few of these are in the hospitality industry, and there might be a reason for it, who are desperate to have veterans skills because they are seeing, they know, they understand the resilience, team working skills, adaptability, the ability to frankly get up in the middle of the night and turn up on time. Some of these things which we all take, also service leavers and veterans, perhaps take for granted. And out there in the rest of the commercial marketplace or in charities or wherever, there are quite a few people who don't really get those things. So I think it's a time, and going back to Annette's point about or sort of confidence or anxiety and things, I think we all tend to be quite self-deprecating a bit. People who are used to being in a team, we're not so good at then fighting for us as individuals, if you like. And I think quite often we use great team players, but some people almost feel over anxious about this, when really it is confidence that service leavers can have based around their service backgrounds, which is tremendous. And many other employers would love to have people with those sort of skills.
And I agree, but I would also say that actually the people that speak for us best, because we don't sell ourselves very well, are the veterans. And veterans, in my experience, particularly in the NHS, are so keen to support others coming in and are so keen to showcase the skills and the transferable skills and to support that actually that's something that I think is new. And also, Jim, I know things have moved on a bit in terms of the package, but for me, understanding that the support in employment was available a long time after you left as well is also really important. So you can get support now, even if you left donkey's years ago, through RFEA and others. But so we're in a better place a bit, I think.
Yeah, I've found... Sorry, Annette.
I would say one of the real things that people forget, and it's a massively transferable skill, is the military equips you with soft skills. So as Alistair said, teamwork and communication skills. And actually, you would notice this, Jim, because you were in the police and the ambulance service. Communication is key. And the soft skills, the being able to recognise all those the verbals from patients or clients or people that are in distress, you would be able to pick up their visual skills, their non-verbals, recognise them and deal with them really, really appropriately, because we've all, from time in the military use those soft skills literally every single day. And most people don't recognize that sort of 80% of our jobs are soft skills. And that helps to build the resilience, the bounce back ability, and the support network, because we generally, as veterans, we want to play it forward.
Yeah, we do.
Completely, Annette. And I think those soft skills, which people can, when people do see them, I mean, particularly like resilience. So we've mentioned it, but these are pretty key things, and sort of reliability. But I also do come back to this ability to take on something new and take on, be trained in another area. And sometimes people want somebody with full-on training in a particular background. It could be sort of cyber tech or engineering skills or training, which many people who serve get those as part of their trade. But you don't have necessarily to have those things to still succeed in these areas. I mean, the NHS would be a classic example. We'll come on more about the NHS in a moment. But it's the soft skills are really, really very important. And I think the really great employers really do get this, and I think they're desperate to have these sort of things. And sometimes without, it's clearly been a very difficult period. But if you think of, to make perhaps a comparison with the aviation industry, also Gatwick Airport, many staff who've been laid off, and frankly, some of their futures look bleak in that industry, given what's going on. But actually, given what they've been doing, when they compare, say, to somebody who served in the armed forces with lots of change, lots of different roles, lots of different experiences, more soft skills, I do think there is a genuine opportunity for veterans and service leavers in the environment, which is pretty challenging right now, let's face it, going forward. But we've got a great, nice comment coming in here. Absolutely being able to manage the public is a family key. Exactly. So there's a very good point from somebody from LinkedIn. Absolutely, being able to manage public is a fabulous key transferable skill. Guard watch, yeah, exactly. It's a very, very interesting point.
And what I loved when you started this section, Alistair, was you talked about the fact that not only do we stand up and lead, and that's veterans of all ranks coming out, but we're also easy to lead. We can take orders and we can get on with it and we can do it, and therefore we can deliver, and that's got to be an asset for any employer, isn't it?
And I think completely, Debs, and actually that point which just came up just now from Eddie, thank you very much indeed, about can-do attitude. I mean, again, one other thing which is the sense of humour, and it is sometimes generated on operations when frankly things can be pretty bleak and a bit challenging, whether it's in a Force 10 in the North Sea or whatever, or it's in Afghanistan in a FOB or something. People have gone through real challenges, and the ability for people in the armed forces to have that sense of humour, and when all around them is actually starting to look a bit creaky. So I think, again, that when you look into the demanding aspects of civilian workplaces is another huge asset. So I think it's good. I think there's so much around this, and I know in terms of the attributes and perhaps the skills, and in the end, confidence for people to show. Yeah. So and let's have a look at. We're getting a few more comments. So thank you very much for loads of people actually logged on. It's really great to see, and we're getting really great some comments coming through. So Susan, thank you very much. Regarding how can employers work better to gain people to work in an environment. How can employers work better to gain people? Yeah, I mean, I think there's an interesting point about employers, and I think there is a lot of work going on, dare I say, to engage with employers. I know RFEA, well, it was part of Career Transition Partnership. We have 9,500 employers across the UK who are keen to support veterans. I think they get it. And perhaps a point I would say, and I do say this to employers, you don't have to feel sorry for veterans. You don't have to have lots of sympathy for them. You will take them on. It's good for your business, good for your company, organization, your charity, whatever. It's good for your bottom line. And I would absolutely include in that people from a more challenged background, perhaps so from the wounded, injured, and sick background. You don't feel sorry for what they've gone through, what they're going through. Take them on. They'll be inspiring people to have in your workshop, in your workspace, in your factory, wherever, in your office. And we've seen this time and time again when all sorts of people have made a huge impact. So it's
workforces can take from that, Alistair. They can take the attitudes and approaches, and it's not just the can-do attitude, it's the will-do attitude. And workforces can learn, well, not learn because that's derogatory, they can absorb some of the ripple from it. If you are in contact with somebody who is positive and forward facing and really wants to engage, ask lots of questions and makes an effort, other people up their game.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. But Adrian's point of the can-do, not overwhelm our non-military counterparts. We're not coming in as Rambo. And we're there to learn in post. We, it's a two-way street. We can give, but we're also there to learn and take experience and take from those that have been in the post for 1, 5, 10, 20 years.
Yeah, and most of us do know that we've still got stuff to learn, and that we can learn from our civilian employers and in our civilian environments. And it's just getting that blend of our skills and other skills and working them together, isn't it? So
yeah, and learning is good. Every day is a school day. It should be.
I think that's a great point, Annette, and actually Deb's as well, and actually Adrian's point just a moment ago, and also Dusty's as well. I mean, thank you for those comments. I mean, I think there's a bit. Now, here's the thing. Absolutely, it's not right for people who, just because they've been in the armed forces, to think there's some right about getting these roles and sort of being let's say, over the top in the workplace. People have to fit in, and it's a key thing about understanding. Transition also means understanding the new commercial, civilian, charity, whatever environment and the processes and the culture, which can be different. And I think there's a really key thing here. It's being able to move on in a way which still embraces and be proud of the military service and past, but not allowing it to dominate too much. And then people saying, "Gosh, this person, they're not fitting in. They've never moved on." So there's a real thing in that. I think so. It's developing the confidence to fit in. But not losing. We've all served, and people who've served. You don't want to say that's it, horrendous time, because it hasn't been the case. We've been very proud of our service, but not let that dominate the way we are in the civilian workplace. That's very interesting.
As Deb said, it gives us standards and values. And the other thing to consider is potentially we could be in the civilian workplace longer than we were in the military. Jim is a perfect example. But the skills and the talents and the standards and the values he took from RRW, he took into the police force and subsequently into ambulance service.
Yeah,
amazing. Yeah. Well done, Jim.
Well, thanks. I mean, they stood me in good stead, and I'm not to say one of the biggest things that service leavers will take with an employer is flexibility.
Yeah, really good point.
On top of that. If you've got something that's got to be done at the last minute, I think you'll find your ex-forces will be the ones who'll step in and do it.
Yeah.
Get on with the job.
Yeah.
So I think many of these things are really good. Obviously, they're broad, they're generic. They're really good attributes and things like that. So I think perhaps when we now look at, say, the health area and the NHS, and there's this amazing program called Step Into Health, it'd be quite interesting to explore with Debs now about how they're making transition into that, why the NHS is such a good employer for veterans, and about the sort of camaraderie which exists. And also, just to set a bit of context here, I think it has to be said that in the past, historically, before this programme, there were not that many people from the armed forces who used to go into the NHS. That has now changed. And I'm sure, Debs, you'd love to hear what you say about this. But I think that's changed in terms of the numbers, the volumes, and people really seeing it as a great career. So, Debs, what's your sense of attributes in the NHS?
And I think the first thing I want to say is actually a hats off to my colleagues in the NHS, because a lot of the skills that we've been talking about, those transferable skills, I see in my colleagues in the NHS all the time. And actually, over the last 15 months or so, we have seen amazing work being done from our NHS colleagues. So that is why I'm actually such an advocate of the programme, besides being kind of employed to run it. But But it's a programme which really celebrates those shared, the shared culture, the shared values, and the public service bit really comes to front. And actually, if you're interested not just in looking after your patients, but also looking after your colleagues and creating a workforce that is doing that, then combining the NHS and the armed forces is great. So what about the programme? We started counting through our jobs board in May 19. And since then, 30,000 people have applied for jobs in the NHS from the armed forces community, and about 1,000 are in. And what we've done is try to unpick some of those figures so that we can work out where folk need a bit more help. And they need a bit more help in things like the application process. Because if they can get to interview, they've normally got quite a good chance of getting the job. And then we're unpicking as well where folk are pitching themselves, and what roles they're going into, and what type of careers they're looking for. So the programme is, I describe it as an hourglass, really, where you've got the armed forces community in its widest sense at the top, and the programme at the neck supporting into those 350 different roles, and a workforce of 1.3 million in the NHS. So that's kind of where I've come from, and I'd love to know what else I need to do, and what our audience thinks needs doing in this space, and how the programme is viewed by organisations like RFEA that we work really closely with.
I think it's been transformational, Debs. I mean, I'm not just saying it because you're here, but as I say, going back to say 4 or 5 years ago, there were not traditionally that many who used to go into the sector. Again, interesting to try and unpick that in some ways. So I think it needed a programme, and I think you've had many applications, but I mean the numbers now going into it is tremendous. In the end of the day, I'm sure everyone knows this, but I mean NHS is by far the biggest employer in the UK. You could say sources of funding are pretty secure. Well, they are really for a government department. So it is for lots of reasons. There are so many elements to it as well. I mean, I'm certainly not saying I would understand the complexity of it. There are so many different parts. So I think from an RFEA perspective, we think it's a tremendous, Step Into Health is a tremendous programme. I think it's a wonderful pathway into an environment which is very, very rewarding, does incredible service to the country, and also retains some of these things which people have got used to in their service side. Real sort of camaraderie, teamwork, actually, crikey, work under pressure as the teams have been over the last 15 months. Huge pressure in a very challenging time. So I think it's a wonderful pathway into that thing, and I'm very hopeful that more, having been on our event today, will be applying and be more interested. I know, Jim, what's your sense?
Well, I was going back to that sense of belonging again. After leaving the police, I took an office job and didn't have that sense of belonging. And a couple of friends had joined the ambulance service. In fact, they're friends I was in the army with. And I saw it advertised. And I applied, got the job, and I haven't looked back. It's been a brilliant employer, and I've got that sense of belonging again. And the RFEA has helped with both those applications that I had since leaving the police. They didn't have a leaving package as such, and it was just how to write those transferable skills down onto an application. Because it had been a long time since I'd applied for a job. Sort of.
I think there's another interesting thing, Jim, in this, as well as, I mean, sometimes it's referred to the blue light a bit. Of course, the ambulance service being one of the emergency services, and you've served in another one, the police service. And again, there's a very big read across between military service, for obvious reasons. And I think that you'd have seen it in the police. I mean, there are, again, stressful periods when you need people who are going to turn up, be reliable, and work under pressure, extreme pressure. And I'm sure the ambulance service exactly the same way. So I think there's the theme with the sort of health NHS, but also the blue light element of it.
And we do have well about 87,000 vacancies across the NHS in the UK at the moment, and we know our NHS workforce is really struggling. So there is perfect opportunity, but combine that with everything we've seen over the last 15 months of COVID support force, 20,000 military personnel on standby to support the NHS. I think something like 400 odd tasks being done by members of the military in support of the pandemic response. And I think today there's still about 400 actively committed to supporting. So that close working relationship is something we've got to build on, and we've got to kind of exploit. Sounds a bit aggressive, but actually we've got to say, look, this works. This is a formula that's working. It's worked in times of trouble. It can work going forward. So
yeah, we work closely with them, and it's seamless working with the military colleagues when they were assisting at the height of the pandemic.
Same language.
Yeah,
absolutely brilliant.
And you can join the NHS at a number of different levels. So we've got an Agenda for Change sort of banding scale, and people come in at all levels. It's not like the military where you have to come in at the bottom and work your way up. So, depending on the skill sets you've got, come and talk to us, get some advice about how you translate those into where to pitch yourself in the NHS, and then have a look at it. So we've got folk that go in at quite a senior level straight away, really senior level straight away, and then we've got others that come in at the lower grades and then work themselves up in a particular specialism. So there's opportunities there for all ranks and at all levels, I'd say.
And I suppose, Debs, it's probably fair to say that many people who perhaps don't know too much about it would think it's all about, dare I say, healthcare, sort of medical, nursing, doctors, all of that. To sound a bit simplistic about it, but clearly the NHS is a huge organisation with a huge number of other sorts of roles. I mean, project management, I'm sure, commercial. So perhaps give a canter through the sort of roles which people could end up in. So
in terms of staff groups, you're absolutely right. There's the clinical roles and also the allied health professional type roles. So things like physios and podiatrists and phlebotomists and stuff. But you've also got estates and ancillary roles and HR and admin roles. And so IT skills, HR skills, admin skills, project management skills. That operational management is something which we are great at. And when we look at those figures that I talked about earlier, about 44% of our applicants are into those non-clinical roles. And so folk are starting to understand that the NHS is not just about the frontline patient care. It's also about supporting others to deliver that patient care. And we get that in the military, don't we? The enabling and the supporting roles.
It's like the military. The military is not about, the army is not just infanteers. The army needs a whole support service, as does the Navy, as does the RAF. And the NHS is the same. It's not about just the frontline blue lights. It's about all those other roles. And it's great that people are starting to recognise that there is a full, massively sustainable, a really fulfilling career within the NHS. And, from a veterans perspective, for those that are coming out maybe in their 20s or their 30s or even their 40s, where they still have a lot of working life left, that's pension too. And, that's, I'm sure, sounds dreadful, but it is a brilliant employer, secure employer, sustainable employment with really good opportunities to learn and advance and be promoted within the roles.
And it's an inclusive employer, and that's something which we take really seriously in the NHS. And we started out in Step Into Health with Walking with the Wounded and the Royal Foundation, looking at the WIS community and trying to find roles to support the WIS, and we've expanded as we did the national rollout. But there are still opportunities for the wounded, injured and sick community through Step Into Health into the NHS, because it's a big and inclusive employer. So.
That's a great comment here by Susan. Thank you very much indeed. Your lived experience roles are becoming more prevalent, especially with Op Courage. I'm sure everyone on the line will know about Op Courage, this tremendous programme of support which combines the TILs, high and mental health training, support, etc., the high intensity service and CTS elements of the support for that's called Op Courage, and that's been an amazing programme. So Op Courage combines 3 programs which have been existing for quite some time, and the support actually, it's not just about us. We're obviously focusing on the employability and the employment of service leavers and veterans in the NHS, but also what the NHS does for service leavers and veterans in terms of healthcare and mental health support, etc., is quite tremendous. So good point there. Another point coming up from Darren. Cheers, Darren. Well, they're not simple routes into nursing and paramedic. You could almost take any ex-military and give them a paid apprentice. That's a great question, actually. And I don't know the answer. Debs, is that?
So we're looking at some schemes. There are some education schemes out there, and of course you can use your education money or your FE funding to support some of those retraining schemes when you come out. And I know a number of folk who have come out and completely changed track once they've left the military and have retrained either into the allied health professional roles or actually into other clinical roles. And there's lots of case studies for them on our websites. So there is some funding available through the military for it as part of your resettlement. And there's also traineeships and apprenticeships within the military for those that want to go down, within the NHS, for those that want to go down that route. So there are some opportunities there. We're also looking at launching things like an earn as you learn type scheme for going on the doctor's route, if you like, and those are being looked at the moment. And Health Education England is one of the arm's length bodies that are developing schemes across the board to support people joining health careers, and they've got some great stuff on their websites too.
I would also say for nursing, a lot of the nursing courses now come with a bursary, and the bursary is about £10,000 a year. So it along with the fees being paid, because £9,000 per year, it's an expensive course to go to university for 3 years. But if you can get your fees paid and you can have that £10,000 a year bursary, it's in gold. And to join as a nurse, I think they're looking for 3 hires in Scotland and 5 GCSEs at A's and B's in England. So it is achievable, especially if you are looking at an access course first to get you just onto that first step. It's a really good entry level.
Yeah, and I'm a generalist, but I can certainly, if folk are interested, help folk to find the right person to talk to within the NHS about those areas.
Thanks, Debs. I mean, I think there's a really key theme in here, and I suppose the big message, perhaps to everyone, is that you don't have to be already a healthcare professional in the armed forces. Of course, we have many. To go into this, it's much more generalist. It can be, and it might be even historically quite a few people who did come back from a sort of a medic or nursing background didn't actually go. They went into, when they left the armed forces in transition, they went in a completely different area and moved away from it. But I'm sure that the NHS would welcome with open arms people with good qualifications, clinical qualifications. But it's more than that. It is the more general things which you talked about. And here's a link here to perhaps the conversation I had with some other people in other sectors. Let's say the hospitality industry. And again, historically, few people have gone into it for the armed forces. And but more recently, and that's chefs and people in the catering branches, they tend to leave and go into something different. But it's interesting to see now how that industry is going to develop post-COVID. You big training programs and everything. And again, for people who've probably never touched the catering piece. Yeah. Very, very interesting.
So Lee's asked a question on there about project management qualifications. I joined the NHS initially in a project management job, and I did Prince 2 as part of my resettlement through the CTP in order to do that. So Prince 2 is one that I know is well recognised, APNG, and actually having those qualifications, even if you're not necessarily using them, gives an assurance that you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, there's a real interesting thing about project management around too for a while, and then but quite a few people now are also looking at more wider things, and sometimes without. And I think there's some very, very good experiences across the armed forces in project management, more so than frankly used to be, certainly when I joined. But so anyone who is involved in quite complex programs in any of the 3 services or the Ministry of Defence, it gives you very, very good experience in this. And would go down very, very well in the NHS.
And I think that does lead on to something I know you want to talk about, which is the sort of top tips. So yes, it's about the qualifications, but it's definitely for the NHS not about cutting and pasting your CV. It's about giving those examples of what you've done in your military career as part of your supporting statement in your application. But
evidencing your skills.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good moment perhaps to move on, just to talk perhaps a bit about, what do we consider the top tips. And some of this maybe we'll come back to. In fact, just before I do, I'll just come back to a point that Jim said about, it's an observation I've had about having been involved with many people in the policing area. And I was talking to people in the Police Federation the other day, but there is very little, take your point, Jim, of support for people coming out of the police service. I mean, years ago, they always used to, quote, retire, having spent a whole career in and then didn't work again. So they didn't really need too much. Now many are leaving much earlier, and they're realizing they need some sort of support. So watch this space. I think there will be more, hopefully, because people deserve it for sort of the service that they've done in the police. But right now, I think people in the armed forces, in some respects, can be very reassured or grateful for the fact there is such a strong provision called Career Transition Partnership, CTP, which doesn't exist in some of these other areas.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just put that one out there. Yeah. So top tips then. What would we say? And I've got a few coming up. But Jim, what was your sense on this?
I'd tailor your application to the job that you're applying for. And don't just have one generic one for every application. And highlight all your skills and give some good, strong examples. And the information I was provided was about how to do the STAR format. Because I didn't know about how to do that. They didn't do that when I last applied for jobs, so that was really very useful. And I've applied for 2 jobs since leaving the police, and I've got both of them.
Wow, that is amazing success.
RFEA to the fore.
That is tremendous, achievement. Just picking up on the point. Absolutely key on that. I mean, we hear it from time over again that people say, "Oh, I've done my CV," and they think that's it. You've done a CV, and of course, when you serve, we're not used to civilian CVs when we are serving. They tend to be sort of more of a bio type, what you've just done, and then when you make the transition, you then think, "Oh yeah, you need to write the CV." But actually, I would say it's use it as a template. And then when you look at the thing, to take your point, Jim, absolutely. When people look at a role they're interested in, look at the job spec, look at the thing, and then put a covering letter which absolutely nails all of the requirements. So you do need that to change it. So every CV is different. Sometimes they can be similar, but pretty different for whatever role you're going for. It's a very good point, Jim. Top tip.
And in the NHS, actually, do not cut and paste your CV. Or even worse, don't cut and paste it and put it in the application form. Or even worse, send your CV unsolicited to someone, because it's not how it works. So it's write a supporting statement that doesn't look like your copy and pasted CV. It looks like you're answering the question you've been set. But in the NHS also, it's about having the conversations. So, making sure that you speak to the person whose phone number's at the end and is the recruiting manager. And more importantly, when you've got time in their diary and they're probably really busy, rehearse what you're going to say, so that you're not just going on in the verbal diarrhea and you've wasted your time and theirs. And they don't think, I need to look out for that CV or that application. They think, that's somebody I'd like to work with, they're going to fit in.
On the phone call, have a hook. Absolutely, have a hook. And tie it into the job description. Read the job description properly. Actually pay attention to the job description. Work out how you are going to demonstrate, how you are going to evidence your skills against what they're asking for. Because if you don't do that, if the system that's being used contains an applicant tracking software, it's going to turf you if you don't have the correct language, if you're not using keywords even.
Yeah, and I'm going to say something controversial now. A lot of military folk that I talk about don't have their rank anywhere in their application. And when I'm looking at a CV, I don't want to pigeonhole someone, but I do want to give context around what they've done. So I wouldn't mind seeing it somewhere once. And I give an example. I was chatting recently to a brigadier who was trying to apply for roles, and nowhere in that CV did it mention that he'd reached the rank of brigadier. And most folk know that's pretty good, right? So you would expect it to be there somewhere once, but just not over-egged and not every other word.
Yeah.
it's a great point, Debs, because I think somewhere must have given some advice to people leaving, said, well, you need to sort of commercialize your CVs. And I mean, I know what they were trying to do. So again, here's a key thing. When you write a CV, you do not want it to sort of sound like, mod speak or army speak with lots of army acronyms, and people say, wow, what are all these, one div, regimenty type, all of that stuff, because a civilian employee will not understand it. But, and there is a but in this, you don't go the other full hog to almost erase your service background. And genuinely, I saw a CV only 2 weeks ago, and I had no idea this individual had served at all. I thought he might have been a civil servant, but then, or possibly might have served. And then I realized at an interview, he spent 22 years. And it was completely out of the thing. So there's again, I've seen some other ones, some from quite senior people who are leaving and turn words like, the sort of commanding officer typey thing to, managing director or chief operating officer. I'd say be careful. Don't make sure that people can understand it and readable. It's easily read and understood. But don't be embarrassed about some of these things. But try and compute some of those roles with what it would mean without translating or changing the titles. But I think these are really very interesting things. I would say, just to open it out a wee bit more, I think when people are thinking about, let's say, before you get to interviews and CV stage, where to go. And I think right now, this comes back to the environment we're now living in post-COVID. If I can say post, coming out of it, if we are, keep fingers crossed, touching wood, etc., is that I think we've got to be really quite savvy, and I would recommend about which sectors to be looking at. And I think that the nature of work is changing. So keep an eye out on the sectors which are now doing well. Firstly, health and care sector. We've just been talking about it, and for obvious reasons, people can see the importance. We've just gone through this horrendous pandemic, and absolutely front and centre is healthcare. And as Debs has said, huge numbers of jobs. That's one. Cyber tech industry, distribution, green energy. So areas which as service leavers, never really been involved in that much. Look out for these. I mean, some of these things are recruiting huge numbers of new roles in various parts of the country. And one other thing right now, it's probably fair to say, given that there's 3 times more people applying for roles than it was the case 2 years ago. So it's more competitive. So, but not wanting to put you people off, because bring out those skills and attributes which we've been talking about, which really make a difference. So there are, and I have to say, probably it's worth sometimes, given that the number of roles right now has reduced, although it's now increasing again, look at things, accepting things if you're in transition, something which might be a stepping stone to another one. Don't expect the full-time career option straight away. You might be lucky, you might get a job with the NHS and you're there for the next 30 years. Fantastic. It might be you need to get something initially and then as a stepping stone. Now, Dusty, thank you very much. Sanitize CV stems from poor, no feedback. Yeah, that's an interesting point about lack of feedback. I mean, the good employers do give feedback. Quite a few literally will, if you're unsuccessful, you just get an email. Sometimes you don't even get that, which is appalling. But always do ask for it, and it's always quite useful.
And get it with the NHS.
Right, yeah, that's great, Debs. That's really good.
Oh, well, good, Gavin.
Brilliant.
Good. Excellent. So, Gavin, I think that's probably registered with RFEA, is it? That's good to see. Or
yeah.
CP. Well, you'll see. Well, we'll have to make sure. Yeah, you'll see which advisor you get allocated to.
I'm glad I did.
Yeah.
Well, actually, yeah. And I think we're sort of coming back to some of these other themes, and we may well come back to. I think we mentioned the sectors, etc. And one of the things I would say, I think the other thing probably it's fair to say there is now a skills shortage. So to be aware. And then when you see this skill shortage, which is happening, digital skills, lots of areas. I mean, I think one of the reasons why I'm getting all these calls from the hospitality industry is I'm sure that there are a lot of people that they've presumably post-Brexit, many of the perhaps the European staff have now reduced, and they're now really wanting to recruit a lot of people. So being aware of what skill shortage are around.
There might be opportunities for funding as well, Alistair, in terms of local councils or local charities, or dependent on your circumstance, it could be that we look at things like employment support grants through RFEA and support full training to get that access into employment or to upskill or to support onto a course that then moves in towards things like Step Into Health, into the access to education, things like that.
Yeah.
Working as theatre support worker via Step Into Health. That's brilliant.
Nice to meet you, Paul.
Great, Paul. And I was a theatre nurse, so yeah, I know where you are. I know what you do. It's fantastic.
And Jim talked about timing earlier in terms of kind of moving through careers, and a lot of folk are nervous about when they should start to put applications in, and they're not building up their networks soon enough. And I spoke to someone quite recently who said, I'm out in 2 months and I haven't got a job yet. And I said, well, have you applied for any? He said, no, I've just signed up to Step Into Health. Well, you've got to do more than sign up to Step Into Health. You've also got to apply for the roles, have the conversations, and use the program to its full bit. So there's a little bit of onus on you as well. And also you've got to plan that transition carefully. Don't leave it to 2 months beforehand.
Job applications can take 3 or 4 months. So when you are looking at applying, as Jim says, and as Deb says, you have to actually work your timeline track left, not right. So you know where you want to be finishing, but you also need to work that time back so that you can see how far in advance you need to apply, because you've got to go through multiple stages. People don't just receive your CV, read it and go, oh, fantastic, let's interview tomorrow. There are processes that have to go through from HR and within employment law. And as a consequence, it takes time, because it might go through several transitions and departments to get to the point where an interview panel could be convened. Then people are invited to interview, and you're taking people away from their primary tasking. So you're actually taking them away from the normal day job. You then have to allot that time, and people have to have notice then to be invited to interview.
Yeah. So, we should be great at working backwards from a fixed HR, shouldn't we, in the military? That's what we do, right?
Technically.
and turning up 5 minutes before needed, etc.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this point, which is Jim mentioned it right early on, and it's a cracking one about timing. And I think the important thing to say is nobody can be too prescriptive about it, but clearly there are better times than others to leave. And I think some people do the whole time and then go the final bit, but others seek to leave earlier. And it may I know when I was serving in the Navy, I had a lot of time would come up, submitting 18 months notice of discharge and stuff. And you always say, well, everyone leaves. You're just going to make sure that it's the right time. Some people leave it too late. Some people go too early. The key thing is to make sure it's done at the right time for you. And I think a lot of factors come in that. And so let's a few things. One is perhaps the skills, the rank you've achieved, but certainly the qualifications, let's say, because it might be, and we meet people like this quite often, that you say, well, I've had enough. I think I want to go. And you say, well, actually, okay, start the process, but hang on in there. You're about to get promoted again, or you might get a better qualification, which will set you in good stead in 5 years. So I think the key point in this on timing is, if it is coming up to the end of your 22 years or whatever, or your whole service career, make sure you have started much earlier. If you're thinking, okay, much earlier than that, you've done for 4 years or 6 years or whatever, and you start to think, I'm now leaving, start the process, but don't jump straight away, because it does take a bit of time. We talked about commercializing or seeing, working out the CV, understanding which sectors. And we're talking about these sort of things. I mean, we go to many careers fairs, and quite a few very really good service leavers are there, and I chat to them, and very smart they are, great, they've done quite a bit of preparation. But actually, when they go round a variety of employers, some of them have no idea which even area. That's not a criticism, but look at then these pathways, and it might be into the security side, it might be into media, it might be into hospitality, or the health side. So do look for those pathways to understand, is it the right thing for you? Is it the right career path that we want? So I think timing is really important. Right now, it's fair to say with COVID, a lot of people are staying in. A lot of people have taken the notice out who had it because they can see many people are worried about the state of the economy. That will not carry on forever, and I think we'll see an increase quite soon of people perhaps more brought back to normal rates of service leaver sort of outflow. But actually, having said that, the numbers of early service leavers we're seeing leaving is at an all-time high. This year, about 4,000 are leaving the armed forces who serve less than 4 years. So that's a pretty big number. And again, different sort of thing, going to something which you want to start again, a brand new in these careers, which could well be the NHS or could be some other area. Yeah,
do the research.
Sorry, Annette, after you.
Sorry. Do the research and own it. Own your transition. Own that space that you recognise what you want to do, and do due diligence. Do your research.
Yeah. And I was going to sort of build on what you both said, actually, and say, at the moment, being veteran friendly is something which a lot of NHS organisations are getting themselves accredited to. They're signing the Armed Forces Covenant. And so ask who the Armed Forces champion is in the organisation, and whether you can have a chat with them as well, because you'll get some insights and some help there, going back to this veterans like to help veterans bit.
And networking.
Yeah, and put yourself out there and say, you know, I'm a veteran, identify as a veteran or a service leaver or whoever you are, and acknowledge therefore that organisations will give you a bit of extra understanding because of that, either through guaranteed interview scheme or through just connecting you to somebody who understands and speaks the same language in the application process. So.
It's a very, very good point. I mean, I think there are a large range of supporting areas. I mean, in fact, I think increasingly people are seeing more mentoring as well, which is good to see. So companies like Barclays operate a mentoring scheme, which is good. I think it has to say that, you know, for those in transition, first protocol, of course, it has to be CTP. And there are some other support mechanisms. And then through life, for those beyond the sort of the initial transition, charities like RFEA will support any member of the armed forces, any three service right across the UK, no matter what rank or rate, from senior officers to junior soldiers, sailors and airmen, and all, no matter what circumstances that they've left. There are a number of other charities who are doing great stuff, more in the specialist and more vulnerable veterans area, you know, like the Poppy Factory, Walking the Wounded. And Walking the Wounded, of course, were the founding members of Step Into Health. So, and they're a very strong partner to RFEA, and people know that you know, we deliver Project Nova in partnership with Walking the Wounded. That's to help veterans in the criminal justice system at risk of arrest or have been arrested. And there is it's an area which is, again, needs more support and help to make sure people can get back on the road to getting into employment and sort of recovery in their lives. So I think there is a lot of support out there, but I'm well aware that sometimes it can be quite bewildering. There are so many websites and things, so don't get too distracted on some of the other companies, let's say, who are saying they're all about supporting, and yet you just have to slightly keep an eye out there. Their motivations might be in the end to make money out of it, as opposed to the charities and the official provision, which is there to support. And one thing I also want to mention is Defence Transition Service as well, which is the MOD provided holistic approach to transition, which very much meshes in to career transition partnership. So there are a range of support things, but I mean, coming back to the key things, the theme for today is there's clearly a fantastic pathway into an area which is growing with, frankly, quite a lot of funding in it, a lot of exciting opportunities, which is the health sector and in NHS, and not least through the Step In Health programme, which Deb so brilliantly runs. So we're coming towards the end. I notice we've got a couple of more minutes to go. Any last minute points from anybody before I sort of sum up? Just check if any more points. Or anybody out there, have you got any other questions?
If you're looking for signposting, consider talking to Veterans Gateway, talk to RFEA. We are happy to signpost. And obviously, talk to Step Into Health, sign up, talk. Find us on LinkedIn, talk to us all, and we can signpost.
Yeah. And as Susan says in there are trusts employing people to help make them more veteran friendly and to improve that. So have a look at NHS jobs for those roles as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really key point. I mean, I think there's a real general thing which I know I'm really passionate about, and that is it is actually promoting the value of veterans in the workplace. We've covered this earlier on, but it is such a key thing. And so for those of veterans who are out there in good jobs, make sure you keep an eye out for others who are applying. Be a mentor yourself, because I know it's quite often just when they're still serving, then they might have questions to ask about the sector, the area they're going into. So please do reach out to them. And I think that's a great thing. So it might be that individuals out there or listening have had good transition themselves in good jobs. That's brilliant. In the end, 84% of those who use CTP do get into a role in 6 months, which is great. But there are quite a few who don't, and then there are others who come out of work later on. But from your experiences, do help to mentor and support those who are following behind in the transition space. So perhaps just sort of conscious of time. I mean, I think, it has been a challenging time, and certainly the economy, has gone through horrendous period last year. Right now, the economy is in unprecedented growth. So there are sectors now really taking off. But it is a challenging period, and so be savvy. Listen to, hopefully the tips we've been talking about is going to help those in transition, or those veterans who need to move on or want to get a new job, or even get a job if they've been made redundant. And there's many of you out there. So, and when you look at all those sectors, what a brilliant place to start in this year of the NHS, or this period of the NHS, is to look at the health sector as a great area to start. So hopefully that was useful, and I'm just conscious of time, but I've personally really enjoyed it. The inaugural Careers Sitrep with a theme around healthcare and the NHS, celebrating Armed Forces Week. Armed Forces Day obviously is tomorrow. We would at this stage be in Scarborough, on the seafront somewhere, which is where it was going to be last year as well as this year. It's now been postponed till next year. Which is a shame, but we look forward to that. But in the base of it, it's nice to be able to mark Armed Forces Day with such a celebration of the armed forces, the amazing men and women, and particularly those brilliant ones brilliant ability to go into the civilian workplace once their armed forces careers are finished. So well done. And can I just say thank you very much indeed to my guests, and today, it's very Deb's, fantastic to see you, Jim, great to see you, and Annette, likewise. Thanks for all the comments, and please do keep the comments in. We're going to be running these at about a monthly basis, and so watch out for the next topic, which will be a very topical theme, which we'll be covering in around 4 weeks or so. So just look out for that. But it's been a pleasure, and I hope you've all enjoyed it. And please keep in touch. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.